Final load button there. It looks like it's there. So, and we've got folks coming in. Perfect. Well, why everyone comes on in to our little webinar space here. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our live virtual event this evening. We're so happy you're here. I'm hosting this evening. My name is Jessica. I'm the event coordinator at Country Bookshelf, and we are absolutely delighted and grateful to be here with the authors of In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, and to also share this virtual space with our fellow Books in Common Northwest stores, Paulina Springs Books in Sisters, Oregon, and Madison Books in Seattle, Washington. If you are interested in all the other fun things that we have planned for Books in Common, just visit booksincommonnw.com for more information, or follow us on Eventbrite to get all the email updates for when we have our next event going live. Before we get into all of the fun, interesting, insightful things this evening, I do want to remind you all, number one, you can purchase, if you haven't already, I should say, you can purchase a copy of In Case You Get Hit by a Bus from any of our sponsoring stores. I'll pop a link into the chat here in just a couple minutes, and you can visit Books in Common, and we just click on the logo of your favorite sponsoring store and you can support one of us. We really appreciate that. And we really appreciate you supporting our authors today. If you have any questions for our panelists, you can use the Q&A button, which should be down at the bottom of your screen. And you can leave those questions at any time as we go through the event today. We are recording this event also. So if you have to duck out or you missed the first half, do check us out on YouTube so you can watch it in full or share it with all of your friends, because we're all going to want to share this and share the things that we've learned here. If you run into any technical issues, we do recommend just exiting the Zoom and re-entering. And if you're having trouble with your sound, try a pair of headphones. Usually that'll take care of it. This is a shared creative space that we want to remain safe for everyone. And so anyone with harmful, disrespectful, or inappropriate comments or questions will be dismissed from the space. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our authors here tonight. All three of our authors are beaming to us live from New York City. So thank you all for staying up late tonight to join us on the West Coast. Avi Schneiderman, co-founder and co-CEO of Everplans, is an industry expert in the areas of digital estate planning, technology, and consumerism. Avi is a Forbes.com contributor and has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and on CNBC. Adam Seifer, co-founder and co-CEO of Everplans, has helped create multiple huge online communities and networks and is the inventor on the social networking patent, now owned by LinkedIn. Gene Newman serves as Everplans editorial and education director and has spent his career as a writer, editor, and content leader for Maxim.com, Hachette, Flipachi Digital, and other lifestyle properties. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We are thrilled to be here. Adam and Gene and I couldn't be more excited. And I thought that maybe the way that we would start this whole thing off would be to tell you a little bit about how we all, came to be, how the whole thing came to be. But really, this book and our company Everplans came about. It all started way back when I was planning my wedding back in 2010. And I was using all of these really helpful online sites like theknot.com and Martha Stewart's websites. And I was on them every single day. I was on their apps and their guides and their calendars and their checklists. And I don't know why my brain went from marriage to death, but I started to think about what's next in life and what are the other resources that are out there that are going to guide me through the rest of my life. And I just began researching and found that there were plenty of resources to help people plan for weddings. plenty of resources to help people plan for the birth of a child, buy a home, send kids to school, plan their finances and retirement. But after retirement planning, that was it. It didn't seem right that the only unavoidable life stage and the most scary and overwhelming one didn't have any helpful resources or tools to guide people. And being a tech entrepreneur, I got to thinking, and I mentioned this idea to my friend and now longtime colleague, Adam Seifer, who is another tech veteran in New York. And together we got to work. And we created articles about everything from how to create a will to what to wear to a funeral to what does a healthcare proxy do. And our company, Everplans, was the result. And it grew quickly, proving that there was clearly a need for this type of information. And then a big part of our personal story is that about a year after we had started writing these articles, my family experienced a tragedy in my immediate family, which was that my 51-year-old brother was killed in a head-on collision by an impaired driver driving down the wrong side of the road. And everything changed for us in an instant. And my family was thrust into a position that many families experience. We were shocked, we were heartbroken, and we were unsure of what to do next. My brother had made some financial arrangements, but my family had no idea what he would have wanted. And suddenly we had to make all sorts of stressful and expensive decisions in an incredibly short amount of time. Here's a picture of us together. This is actually my favorite picture of us. I was about 2 years old here. But really, this made us realize that in order to really make a difference for people at their time of greatest need, that we had to help people get a plan in place ahead of time. That way, if a tragedy or an emergency struck, families would have easy access to everything that they needed. So Adam and I began building our planning platform, Everplans, and that's when our secret weapon, Jean, came aboard to help make the whole topic more relatable and accessible to all. This book is a culmination of everything that we've learned and will empower and inspire everyone to get a plan in place. But when we started writing In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, well over a year ago, we obviously did not know that the world would change the way it has, which we do address in the book's introduction. And Adam, if you don't mind taking it over for a bit.
Sure thing. Thanks, Abby. Hi, everybody. And what you're seeing here is a picture of my family, and that's who I plan for. And this was actually taken, I think, just over a year ago during the first week of the pandemic, back when wearing masks was still a novelty. And we addressed the pandemic, as Abby mentioned, in the introduction for our book. And so I'll read you a touch right now. For more than 10 years, we have been obsessed with helping people get their lives organized in case something unexpected happens. By far, the most difficult part of our mission used to be convincing people that the unexpected actually happens, and that unexpected things could happen at any time, like getting hit by a bus, as our not-so-subtle title suggests. Then, at the beginning of 2020, the entire world was hit by a bus in the form of a pandemic. The unexpected, the very thing our company was built around, became a reality for just about everyone on the planet. Life as we knew it ground to a halt. Those families that could hunkered down to minimize the impact, and most everyone feared the worst. But there were undeniable bright spots too. A warm text from a friend you lost touch with years ago, a post on social media from someone on the road to recovery, a former coworker checking in to see if you were okay. Group video calls with family members became the norm, a chance at least to see each other's smiling faces and to poke fun at parents who spent half the call trying to figure out how to turn on their cameras or microphones. Birthdays, holidays, and graduations were celebrated remotely, but we could still be together. Then these were the moments that made us forget how tough everything had become and focus on what was really important, the hope and strength we get from those we love, who themselves take strength from us in return.
The feelings of hope and despair that arise during a crisis can often motivate us to make lasting positive life changes. But as memories fade and normal routines return, that feeling of hope and purpose can diminish. This book is intended to help you renew, reinforce, and remind yourself of that hope for the rest of your life. And we believe that planning for your family and loved ones is the key. Our mission has always been to help as many people as possible prepare for the unexpected. That mission to help people ensure that their family isn't left unprepared when the unexpected strikes has taken on an even greater, more solemn importance now. But really, it was always that way for us. Over time, as more and more people started using Everplans, we realized that the site wasn't about death. It was about life. Because getting everything organized lets you live to the fullest, knowing that you're prepared for anything, having done your very best for those that you love. And that's what you'll find in the book, a plan to do just that, and it's easier than you think. And speaking of loved ones, here are my kids. Here's a good question to consider as you get started. What's important to you? Most people simply say family, but we want you to go deeper than that. What's really important to you? It doesn't have to be one thing. Our lives aren't that simple. It might be something that hurts a little or even makes you uncomfortable to think about, because being challenged can spring us into action. We all have different motivations. Maybe you witnessed the chaos a friend experienced after the death of a family member and don't want your own family to suffer the same fate. A parent might be terrified at the prospect of their young children being raised by an unfit guardian, or worse, in foster care. Money is often the cause of most issues. Perhaps you don't want your family going to war over what you leave behind. Or maybe it's as simple as you waking up in the middle of the night, completely wrought at a pandemic that went from a story on the news to our new reality. Once you have a clear vision of your purpose, think of it as a picture-in-picture box on a TV screen following you around the entire book. That picture might have an image of your kids, your spouse, your partner, your siblings, your puppy, or a person that you loved who is now gone. And when you get discouraged or overwhelmed, take a second, visualize that image in your head, and then repeat this mantra: this is why I plan. So now that you know where we're coming from, Jean's going to give the framework in which we help you get your entire life in order without you losing your mind.
Thank you very much, Abby, Adam, and so excited to be here. And the thing we want you to understand from the outset is that how the book is structured, and it's broken into 3 levels, and each one builds on the last to help you gather and organize all the stuff that you already have, all the things that you need or you want, and ways to add personal touches to truly make it yours. Every task covered throughout the entire book has something called a plan of attack, which tells you exactly how to get that thing done, how long it should take, and if there's any cost associated with it. There's also other elements called side missions. Now, these may or may not apply to your life. If you have young kids, aging parents, if you run a small business, you have pets, and so many more scenarios. We also have 3 break time sessions. Now, this covers when you should update your plan, certain milestones in your life, how to have somewhat, uncomfortable conversations with your family without emotions running wild, and what will happen if you don't do any planning at all. Now, even though this book covers every possible component of a person's life, it's broken down into easy to digest pieces to keep you from getting overwhelmed. Now, we're going to give you a brief overview of each level, and we're going to get started with level 1. So, Abby, you're up.
Okay, level 1. Here's where we start things off by helping you get all the following things in your life under control, which includes a system for managing all your passwords and secret codes, your money and assets organized so that you don't have a panic attack, an instruction manual for your home and vehicles, and a decluttered address book where your most useful contacts rise to the top. And this is something I'm totally still working on. If there's one thing we mention in the book, though, repeatedly, it's passwords. It's almost comical how many times we mention them, and we have no regrets because they've just become such a vital part of our lives in so many ways.
Yeah, so the average internet user has more than 130 different accounts, and each of those accounts requires either an email or a username and a password. And so how do you think most people are keeping track of them? According to a Pew Research Center study, 65% of people say that they keep them all in their head. Yes, that's right. Memorization is the dominant method, which means that either everyone is a super genius, because I can't even remember what I ate for dinner last night, Or what they're doing is they're reusing the same password for multiple websites, which we all know at this point is just asking for trouble. And beyond the password issue, unlike your physical possessions, digital assets aren't always obvious. Unlike paintings or bicycles or your collection of Mork and Mindy memorabilia, they're not just lying around the house, and so they can get rendered lost or inaccessible if you don't get them organized. And when we say digital assets, we're talking about both the hardware and the software. And so it includes your phone and your computer and your iPad, as well as everything else that's online or in the cloud, like your social media accounts, your shopping accounts, entertainment accounts, rewards programs, family photos and videos, so much more. Altogether, this is referred to as a digital estate plan, and we cover it from multiple angles throughout the book. And I don't want to give away any spoilers and ruin the surprise here, but we start the book with passwords and we end the book with passwords. As Abby just said, they are that important these days. And then another important aspect that we cover in level 1 is managing your home and your important contacts.
Yeah. Stop for a second and think about all that goes into running a household. This is one of our favorite illustrations from the book and shows how menacing a house can be if you don't know the ins and outs. From the mortgage or rent to the routine maintenance to the utility bills that you pay on a monthly and yearly basis, a typical household could have more than 15 utilities, vendors, or services associated with it. And that doesn't even include how it's financed or any quirks that only you know about, like if part of the basement floods after a heavy storm. But now imagine your family trying to piece all of that together without you around to help. Do they even know where you keep the deed? Do the utilities in your name need to be canceled or transferred to someone else? If a pipe bursts, is there a trusted plumber that you call to get the job done who doesn't rip you off? What about maintenance and care instructions for the car? There are a million things that you have figured out over the years to help your home operate smoothly, which is why the book explains how to create something that we call a home operating system, which is a helpful and easy to compile instruction manual for your home. We also provide a system to help you get all the important contacts in your life organized, which can help your family in so many ways, whether it's for something routine or during an emergency or for when it's time to settle your estate. You'll find that when you're reading the book, level 1 is about getting everything that you have already in order. And as we move on to level 2, you'll notice that we start adding some more elements into the mix.
Correct, because level 2 includes some of the more traditional aspects of estate planning, as well as a deeper dive into your digital world. So here's what we're going to accomplish there. You're going to know how to get a will and power of attorney in place, plus information on setting up a trust, how to organize all your bills and debts into a neat, non-depressing pile, how to compose what we call a personal medical journal, and everything you need to know about advanced healthcare directives. And you'll have brought order to every digital accountant service that you use. Now, this level, it could seem stressful because it involves things that are perceived as complicated. We demystify it all and we help teach you that by doing this stuff, you're going to eliminate all the stress from your life. Now, Adam has 2 examples, one involving a will, another involving healthcare directives that really brings all this down to earth.
Yeah, so this is a picture of my father-in-law, Marvin, with my wife, Carrie. And Marvin was an incredible man, and he died totally unexpectedly about 3 years ago. And even though we figured he didn't have a will, we weren't entirely sure. And so we had to spend the first few days searching all over the place just in case. And then, because there was no will, there was no official executor. And my poor wife had to petition the court just to be named administrator of his estate. And she had to put up a personal bond just so she'd be allowed to do all those unpleasant things like shutting down credit cards and bank accounts and stuff like that. You know, it's already so yucky, and these extra steps made it extra difficult. And it would have been pretty easy to avoid. Getting a will done isn't nearly as complicated or as expensive as a lot of people think. There are tons of free or inexpensive options online, and they cover the basics and they can help you get something in place. And if you have a more involved estate, of course, like a blended family, or you've got property in multiple countries or states, or even if you just have some complicated investments, it's well worth the cost of an estate attorney to get this completed once and for all. if only to save your family the unnecessary burden later. And now on the flip side of this, I want to talk a little bit about how planning in advance ended up making all the difference for my mom. And this is my mom, Joan. And here's where I can talk to you about the importance of medical directives, which you might know as an advance directive. And an advance directive at its core is a combination of a living will, where you state your wishes for what kind of care you do and do not want to receive, and the naming of a healthcare proxy, which is somebody that you trust to make those decisions on your behalf if you can't make them for yourself. And the importance of these documents really cannot be overstated. And I experienced this with my mom, who unfortunately died near the end of 2019 after a really tough battle of cancer. We were fortunate enough to have taken some time several months beforehand to sit down together. And I sat down with her and with my dad, and we straightened out her living will and her healthcare proxy. And then as a bonus, we got my dad's done also at the same time. And we had a chance to discuss what was really important to her. And, you know, it was kind of a weird conversation at the beginning, but once we got going, it just started to flow. And then ultimately, when the end came and she wasn't able to communicate anymore, I knew exactly what she wanted, which was to be at home. And I knew what she didn't want. And there were no dramatic arguments with my family. And I wasn't tortured then, and I'm still not tortured now, wondering if the decisions I made were the right ones. That little bit of communication and planning that we did really gave us all a lot of peace, and it gave her control over her end. And there was a study done by Stanford University that found that more than 80% of patients say that they wish to avoid hospitalizations and high intensity care at the end of their lives, and that they would prefer to die at home. But their wishes are often overridden. And while there are never any guarantees in life, getting these medical and legal documents in place will definitely increase the likelihood that you end up getting what you want. And one of the great things about advance directives is that they're free to do. You don't even need an attorney to execute one. We actually have forms for the advance directives for each state in the country on our website at everettplans.com. And we include some links in the book that'll steer you there so that you can find the right templates for your state and hopefully get your advance directive done once and for all.
Yeah, we walk you through all of this in the book, along with a quick, easy to understand reason as to what each of these legal or official documents provide and the decisions that you need to make. But here's a quick overview. Number one, your will. Who gets your assets? And do you need to name guardians for any dependents? Power of attorney. Who should be making financial and legal decisions on your behalf if you can't? Advanced directives, as Adam was just talking about. Who should be making health decisions on your behalf if you can't? And what sort of treatments do you want? When boiled down, it's that simple. And you'll find that most of your effort won't be in doing the paperwork, but in just making the decisions. And finally, trusts. How to protect assets and even what trusts are in the first place, which are, I still think, a little complicated. Here are some questions for everyone here to think about. Do you have any of these documents in place already? Have you put off creating them? Do you want them, but you're just not sure where to start? One of the goals of the book and Everplans is to make sure that you create the plan that's best for you and best for your family. So do not hesitate to contact us with any questions or concerns that might be keeping you from crossing these documents off your to-do list. And this brings us to the final level, which focuses on personalization.
Yeah, level 3 allows you to personalize your plan with a slew of finishing touches, which include an organizational plan for all your meaningful photos, recipes, and family heirlooms, a record of your personal history, interests, beliefs, and life lessons so everyone remembers you the way that you want to be remembered, a model for writing letters and recording videos so your friends, family, and loved ones can cherish those for the rest of their lives, a complete understanding of everything that goes into planning a funeral, plus a template to write your own obituary if you're up for it.
I want to share something that isn't in the final draft of the book, but it's a story I love, and you can think of it as bonus footage. But I was talking about family traditions over the holidays. This was pre-COVID. And one of our dear family friends was hosting a brunch at her house. When she took me aside, she led me into another room and she showed me something called a miniature chest drink table that her late mother had found antiquing in Canada. And Melanie, our friend, recalled how her mother had two armchairs next to each other with the chest between them. And after she died, Melanie and her family were packing up the apartment and they found notes on the back of her favorite things, including this chest. And it said, "For Melanie, little table, to Melanie, much love, Mom." She also left a note on the back of a Salvador Dali lithograph that Melanie bought her in Paris that said, "My only Dali from my only Mel." The miniature table and Dali lithograph are beautiful, but the notes make them so much more meaningful. This is a beautiful way to express love and say goodbye, but it doesn't have to be a surprise. And while the little table is now safely in Melanie's possession, what if she had never found the note? Cleaning out a late parent's home while grief-stricken could lead to discarding items that have a story to tell. The same goes for family members swooping in and taking everything, especially if they think those items have value. A person we work closely with told us how an in-law looted all the classic furniture from a deceased parent's house before anyone had a chance to claim anything. And while this was many years ago and she's not even sure she wanted any of it, it's still a minor point of contention among the family. So anything that you can do to prevent possible conflicts is a huge gift that you can give to your family, especially if it only requires some paper and tape or a few sticky notes.
And here's the thing I learned working with Abby and Adam all these years. They, like many people here, I'm sure, are obsessed with food and they love to cook. And they're such great cooks that I said, you have to include each one of you at least one recipe, word for word, in the book so people understand how they could start getting their own recipes together so other family members and other generations can enjoy them as well. So now I'd like the master chefs to explain their creation and what organizing recipes means to them. Now, Abby, please go first.
Well, recipes are extremely important to me, as I'm sure they're important to many people here in attendance. My late beloved babysitter, Lydia, used to make the most incredible dulce de leche cookies, and she shared the recipe with me before she died. And every time I miss her, I make these cookies and they bring back the warmest memories. Plus, I get to share them with my kids, which creates new memories for us. I actually didn't include that cookie recipe in the book. I shared something different, which is my Mondo Bread recipe that was adapted from my grandmother's recipe and my mom's recipe. And you can see me here with my sister showing my daughter Danny how to make them. But Adam went a more savory route.
Yeah, I chose something just a little spicier. It's my chili recipe that I've been working on perfecting for over 30 years now. And here's a picture of it in my favorite yellow pot that I got from my grandmother that I always try to use when I'm making my chili. And the recipe is in this great Excel spreadsheet that automatically recalculates ingredient amounts based on how many people you're serving. It has all kinds of tips for replacement ingredients for ingredients that might be hard to find. And it even has other tips like reminding you at the right moment in the recipe to not rub your eyes after you've been handling the chili peppers. And it means a lot to me. And the notion of passing along highly meaningful family recipes plays into a host of other aspects that we include in the book that help you keep your legacy alive. Think of all the personal lessons and tips and knowledge that you might want to leave behind, whether it's information about your family history that maybe nobody else knows, or things that you've loved about your life, or just lessons that you want to pass on to future generations. Technically, all this stuff together is called an ethical will. But in the book, we call it Spill Your Life, and we break it down into 6 rounds, so it feels a little bit like a game show. And this stuff might seem obvious, but when you're answering them, you will realize how many of these questions do I wish I could ask somebody who's no longer around.
Along these same lines, here's something I'm sure we can all agree with, which is helping others. Giving to charity is great, as is devoting your time to a cause. And if you've done work to help others, whether it's regularly volunteering for events, being a big brother or sister, manning a phone for a telethon, or giving donations to organizations or institutions that you're proud to support. Perhaps you've even gone a step further and allocated money from your estate to make sure the money gets to the right place. These details should be clear and direct so that the people you leave behind know to continue to support these causes in your honor. And this brings us to the final part of the book and the inevitable part of life, the end.
And we weren't kidding when we said that we'll help you write your own obituary, because we include 4 templates from small all the way up to supersized. But before that, we walk you through every step there is to planning a funeral. And this includes if you opt for burial or cremation, how to set money aside, and how to add personal touches to the service so you could truly get the funeral that you want.
This might seem like a sensitive topic, but you could also just view it as a practical discussion to have with your family. For example, for my brother's funeral, we probably paid way too much for the casket because we didn't know any better at the time. And when discussing this with my parents, my mom said her preference was for a plain pine box, but my dad surprised us all by saying he wants the most expensive casket we could find, which is good to know. And this is why communication is vital. So you're not spending too much money when you don't need to, or spending too little in the case of my dad.
Yeah, communication is totally central to everything that we cover, because sharing this information and these wishes with others is ultimately what makes a plan complete. But we also know how it can be pretty tricky to talk about some of these things with your loved ones. Talking with family can be littered with emotional and sometimes suspicious landmines. And then when the topics include money or medical issues or death, it can be even more terrifying. And consider for a second that people would rather talk about no longer being on Earth than talk about their finances. The Wells Fargo study that's pictured here and that we also include in the book revealed that although people aren't comfortable talking about money, it's one of the biggest stresses in their lives, and it often causes sleepless nights. And so we offer plenty of tips on how to eliminate the fear and the stress from these topics, as well as tips on how to break the ice and get the conversations going and get your family talking and planning together.
So thank you so much. This barely scratches the surface of what we cover in the book. We can't wait for you to read it and get your own plan completed and out of the way. And if you think the book isn't for you, I have one final story. Before I started Ever Plans with Adam, I was explaining this concept of the company to my parents. And my dad said, I don't need this. All my legal documents and important plans are with our estate attorney. And my mom said, but wait, Milton, who's our estate attorney? So you might have a folder with legal documents and instructions or a file with an attorney, but our lives are made up of so much more. Plus, if no one knows where it is, it's sort of like you never did it at all. So the first step is getting started. This book helps you get started and so much more. Thank you so much for having us. We're here to answer any questions that you have. And Jessica, I'll just pass it back to you now.
Thank you guys so much. My first question, as we wait for folks to maybe leave questions there in the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen, just click that. You can see what other people have asked also and be like, oh yeah, no, I really want to write that. You can upvote it. But I'm curious, you mentioned that there were some things that maybe didn't quite make it into the book. So does that mean A, that there's going to be In Case You Get Hit by the Bus 2.0, or
in case you get hit by 2 buses?
Yes. Or is there something you'd like to share with us that didn't make it into the book that you, since the book has been out for a little bit, that you have encountered people questioning or curious about as you go through your daily life at Q&A or at Everplans? Sorry, that was weird.
We cut enough. The book was written when we handed it in. Of course, like most writers, we went overboard and doubled our word count. So thank you to our editor, John, for getting it back down to a normal, manageable way. And a lot of it included the stories and things along those lines that we had to either really shorten. But when Abby mentioned earlier on that this really is a culmination of pretty much the last 10 years of how do we whittle it down. And one of those is showing the ability to condense it so it's actually doable. And that's what we hear from a lot of people, that they're when they started reading it, they said, wow, it doesn't feel like it's as overwhelming. It feels more of a journey or a plan you're putting together. And, I know, Adam, you say something about how people approach it when it comes to them being overwhelmed. I have to do this all in one day. And it doesn't seem to be that. That's not what we say.
Yeah, we really intentionally left a lot of stuff out because we don't want anybody to feel like they have to take like 3 days off from work to do this type of planning, because then you'll never do it. I think what Gene wants me to say is you don't have to eat the whole elephant at once. The best way to eat an elephant is to start with one bite. And with this kind of planning, we did break it down into these three levels, and then we broke it down into little bite-sized pieces so that you can just do a couple of things. And what we find is that people who just do a couple of things kind of feel unburdened, and they feel relieved, and they kind of feel a little bit heroic, and so they want to keep going. And so yeah, it's not so much about how much we could have spoken about. This was really an exercise in trying to keep people focused on what might be the priorities so that they don't get stuck and paralyzed.
Well, Danielle has a question. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on how to provide for special needs children?
Dean, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, one of our side missions is about everything about kids, and this is one of the example of people that have the situation, and whether or not like you're dealing with, like, again, aging parents or special needs children or people that'll need assistance for the rest of their lives. And the one thing that we say is you really have to get this down on paper, and you have to start sharing the routines that you go through. And because, like most things in life, you do it out of routine. It's something you rely on, but what if you're not around to do it? And again, it doesn't have to be that you're gone forever. It could be that you get sick. Could be that you have to go away. Could be you have another emergency. So when it comes to a lot of these routines, you really want to make sure that there's somewhere that people can do that. And I know we've found this with a lot of people when siblings are caring for their parents and organizing the details behind everything they have to do. Okay, you have to get them to this appointment, you have to do that. And they're all sharing those duties. And even though as a parent, it's your responsibility and you got to take this on, it's your job. But having some kind of plan, it's the most important. And we know it's tiring, it could be exhausting, but you have to make sure that person that you care for will have the same exact care, even if you're not around. So start right now, like literally just start writing it down and taking care of that, because you do not want those routines to be upset after you're gone.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they do write their wills and they name guardians for their children in the will, they never even tell the people that they named as guardians that's what they did. And a lot of the time it probably works out. Kids are resilient, but with special needs children, it's extra important. It's like exponentially important that you have that conversation with the people that you've named as guardians. So A, they know what to expect, and B, you can share those types of information that Gene just laid out, so that they're not trying to like start from scratch to figure out all these really, really important routines, medications, and other things like that.
And there are certain things you can consider putting in place, like special needs trusts, that you should speak with a financial planner about, that can be designed specifically for parents of children who have special needs.
We hear a lot about people with parents with children, and also something that comes up a lot is with pets, because we've talked with people that are older and they're like, there's no one, like how would someone take care of my pet and take this pet in, and where should, how could I set up systems for that? And it doesn't have to be a dog or a cat. I know a financial advisor we spoke with that's setting up a trust for his horse, because he's like, no one in my family would know what to do about this. So it's little things like that you look through your life and you say, what am I responsible for? And how can I make sure that carries on?
Speaking of children, I'm curious if you have any tips or advice for having these conversations with your children. not necessarily about your plan for yourself, but about helping them make a plan. Because as you say in the book, like, you're never too young or too old. And so obviously we want to provide the best care and respect for anyone that we're close with. And so I'm curious if you have any going the other direction tips.
Well, like you said, you're almost never too young to start. And a lot of people don't even realize this, but when kids turn 18 and, a lot of them go away to college, as a parent, if something happens to the child and they have to go to the hospital, that hospital legally can't share any information about that child with you because they're now legally an adult. And so if you've got a kid that turns 18, one of the first things that you should do is to have them fill out a HIPAA authorization form for you, and also ideally name you as a healthcare proxy so that you can make medical decisions on their behalf. And so, that's a place where you can start a lifelong conversation about just important, ordinary, like, stuff that's important for grown-ups to do.
The normal you make this stuff, the better. The chart Adam mentioned that we have in the book about finances is, if you're waiting for, if the first time you're talking about money is when a crisis strikes, it's already too late. And that's when the people, by then people have already got their mindset and they're dealing with that. But also, another thing, Adam, that I know you've spoken about is how sometimes starting a conversation about something innocuous can lead to this type of planning.
Yeah. And I think this can also help another question that came up in the Q&A, where somebody wanted to know how to begin conversations about financial end-of-life planning with parents, especially when they might be reluctant. And, that story that I shared about sitting down with my mom and my dad, it didn't start with it. We didn't jump right into the living will. It actually started with a pretty innocuous conversation about helping them to get my mom's medications organized, because I was seeing that they were having more and more trouble keeping track of all the different pills as more and more got added to my mom's regimen. And so we sat down together, we organized it, we made a chart to hang on the wall for them. And then that naturally led to a conversation about other medical issues. And then that naturally led to this conversation that we had about the advanced directive. And then what was really amazing is my dad, who really doesn't like to talk about stuff like this, really plays it close to the vest, jumped up from the couch while I was talking with my mom and left the room for a while. And then he came back about 10 minutes later waving this piece of paper. And it was this like 80-year-old deed to the family cemetery plot. And he said, "Look what I found. This is where I'm going to be buried someday. There's a spot waiting for me and for my sister." And it was amazing because if we hadn't started with rearranging the medications and plotting those out, we might not have ever gotten to this moment where my dad went digging through his, I don't even know where he came up with this thing, file cabinet or an old briefcase or something, and showed it to me. And then, there was even a chance to pay it forward, because I took a picture of the deed and I texted it to my cousins and said, "Hey, guess what? This is where your mom wants to be buried. I bet you had no idea that this cemetery plot even existed." And so sometimes it's about starting with small things and seeing what you can grow out of that.
It could also be about Abby and her husband, how she shames them into sharing information, which I think is always so great, because
Yeah,
again,
for us, it's not even the serious stuff, but we moved recently, and I didn't know the Wi-Fi password to our apartment, or the unlock code for his cell phone, or for his computer. I realized I didn't know we live in New York City, and he drives to work, but I commute to work, or I used to, on the subway. And I realized if I ever needed to go get our car at the parking garage, I would have absolutely no idea how to retrieve our car, because the parking lot guys don't know me. I've basically never been there. And if we were in an emergency and I needed to go say, hey, I need to get that car, what would I say? And who do I tell them? What's the number? And so it's just some practical information too, that you can start using to get the juices flowing. And I was just going to say for anybody who's listening tonight, something as you've heard, we've shared a lot of our personal stories, and in the hopes of getting people really thinking about this type of planning, and hopefully making it so that it's not too complicated or too stressful for you to get started. But something we're really interested in knowing, if you don't mind leaving it into the chat, is why you're even here in the first place. Why this book, or why this topic, forget the book, is of interest to you. Are you somebody who is planning for your parents? Are you planning for your kids? Are you thinking about this because there's somebody in your household and you're worried about, not about being shut out if something were to happen to them? Anything you can tell us about why you're interested in this topic is really, really important to us, because as we're looking to develop more in this area, it's really useful for us to know how to help the people who are in need. And so I would just say, if you don't mind sharing that into the comments or into the Q&A section, we would really appreciate it.
And then one other last thought, or maybe not last if you guys come up with more ideas, but about talking with parents that might be reluctant. You don't necessarily need to ask them to share the details of their will or the details of their life insurance policy. But what's really important to know is, do they have a will, and where is it? And what attorney did they do it with, right? And same with life insurance. You don't have to know how big the policy is and who they named as beneficiaries, but you need to know that the policy exists and what insurance company it's with, so that if something does happen, it doesn't just evaporate after years and years of them paying for this policy.
Sharing basic information, especially about where accounts are. Like, people always worry, I don't want people to know what I have. Where do you bank? A lot of people don't know where their parents' bank is. They wouldn't know who to call. Just saying that and knowing that isn't really it's not privileged information. Someone says, hey, I have a place at Citibank. Once the whole process goes in place, you're going to have to prove and get access to this type of stuff. But just sharing that, and like Adam said, locations of things, how you keep them, how to Abby mentioning unlock phone code for a phone. Those are the things that will save so much trouble. And it really doesn't take much effort right now to do it.
Have you addressed or given thought, is there a chapter in the book for folks that maybe don't have immediate family? Or some of the especially with COVID, it seems like there have been a lot of isolating factors. And so I'm curious what tips you might have for those folks.
When it comes to doing that, we mention a lot of things like accessing professionals and taking advantage of estate attorneys, financial advisors, agents, people that it does happen where there's just no one in their life that they think is up to the task. And also, as life changes and we go through the milestones, people move away. You have a falling out. You don't want them in your life anymore. There's all these other things that happen. You realize that maybe they're not as responsible as you thought they were. That's why at times when you are putting this stuff together, you would want to speak with an estate attorney and say, could this person then execute the will and make sure things get done in the way that you want them to get done? And having someone close, like you could say, even if you name someone, making sure that they know that this is going to be a tough task, or I expect you to do this, but you should work with somebody just to ease it along. Because a lot of this stuff, it does get, we're not lawyers, we're not financial advisors, but we know that this stuff gets complicated. People we know that are very, very smart, that have everything together, have been defeated by probate court. You walk in there, it's just very time consuming, very confusing, and you just want to move it along. And you realize that's just, asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It doesn't mean you can't handle it.
Yeah. And, you can hire professional executors, so that you don't have to name someone in your family or a friend, or if you don't have anybody to name, to make sure that things turn out the way you want them to turn out. And so, yeah, nobody ever has to be totally alone when it comes to doing this kind of planning.
Another attendee mentions that they've compiled a list of where to find what important documents, etc. Their adult kids all live in other states, and so they're curious if sending this list and this information to them via email is safe, because obviously you don't want that to get into the wrong hands.
Yeah, well, so the service that we have been working on for 10 years now is called EverPlans. And it's a secure online system for making sure that all of this information is stored securely and shared securely with the people in your life who need it most. And if you go to everplans.com, actually, if you buy the book right now, you will get a free year of EverPlans. It's typically $75 a year subscription service. But buy the book and then go to incasethebook.com. We can put that into the notes here, where you will be taken through instructions for how to redeem a free year of EverPlans service. And that's really a wonderful place to make sure that all of this information is in one place. We also basically teach you about every single topic that the book covers. So it's a great companion guide to the book.
Excellent.
Adam, as a security expert here, what would you say about emailing a list of all your personal information and documents to other people?
It's not ideal for a lot of reasons. People's emails get hacked all the time. It's happened to my parents a couple of times, my wife's parents. But also, aside from the security issue, it means that you have to keep sending it every time you make an update. And so that means that there's multiple copies of this floating around in somebody's email. And so we do recommend trying to get your stuff organized in some sort of vault, and a digital vault, like EverPlans, or even like a password manager, so that whoever you give access to that information always has access to the most up-to-date version of it. And they don't have to worry about whether or not they've got the right version because you've sent 10 different versions over the years.
Excellent.
But it's also good that you're actually doing something. Anything you're doing,
Yeah,
we're very proud.
anything you're doing.
Like for us, like do that and keeping it up to date. That's the thing. We say even with passwords, people write them down on lists, and we're like, okay, it's not ideal, but keep them up to date, because a list of outdated passwords is more frustrating than no passwords at all, because you think you have that victory, and then you just realize as you log in, defeat. So keeping it up to date in any process, and making sure it does get shared. That's another thing with EverPlans. You could set it so people could see it today, or you could set it for time limits so they see it after. There's stuff you might want to share now, or there's stuff you could share later. And that's a big issue for people that might be like me, paranoid.
Well, everyone, there are a lot of thank yous in the chat. So if you have other questions, I might share an anecdote to see if that encourages anyone else to anecdote away. My father slipped out on the ice and in Colorado and fell and broke his hip last February, not like 2 months ago February, but like last February, just before the pandemic. And he was calling me on the like flight to the hospital because he had to be flown to a better hospital from where he lives in a more rural area. And I didn't know what was going on, and he was heavily medicated to deal with the pain of having a shattered pelvis, and trying to help him keep things straight and get information from him while he was all doped up was difficult. And so I ended up having to fly down, and was almost immediately like, Dad, Philip, I need you to sign this HIPAA form so that the nurses can talk to me. I need you to, so that someone understands what's going on, because you have a lot of morphine in your system right now. And as he's gone through the process of trying to repair that, it has pushed us to have a lot of conversations and make a living will for him and identify some of those things, because it's super easy for him as like a working class Joe Schmo carpenter to be like, oh, I don't have any assets, I don't need to plan. And it's like, is that entirely true? And so it's been helpful for us to sit down and look at some of the things the way you outline in case you get hit by a bus, to identify that, no, you actually do have stuff, even if you don't think you do.
True. It's totally true. And I'm glad to hear your dad's doing okay. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us, Jessica.
Well, as we were debating with our other stores, one of the things that also struck us, because the first thing that we got from the publisher was the book title, In Case You Get Hit by a Bus. And we're like, whoa, that's not pulling any punches, not ambiguous what this is about at all. But then as we talked about it and engaged with it, it was really, it seemed like an important thing for all of us to bring into the store and to engage with, because we're independent bookstores. Like, these are all small businesses. And so there's a part of it also where you're like, I need to plan for my family, but I have a business
Right.
that needs to have these plans in place as well. And I feel like the pandemic also really shed a lot of light on that, in terms of, like, you have employees to take care of, and you have physical space, and how are you using that physical space, and those kinds of things. So there are a lot of wonderful gems to pick up in Case You Get Hit by a Bus. So some of you have said that you got it from the library. That is an amazing place to get books from. That does still support all of the authors that have joined us here tonight. But also don't be afraid to buy it so that you can make notes and fill in all the prompts and have fun on, I just saw a great page on one of the side missions as I was flipping through, but grab a book, just visit booksincommonnw.com and click on the logo of your favorite sponsoring store. Check out In Case the book once you've purchased your book, so you can get your subscription for a year to Everplans for just the cost of the book, which is $17.95. That's a steal. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for helping us and encouraging these kinds of conversations for your friends and family and for our communities, so that we can all take good care of each other.
Thank you so much for having us.
A great time. Thank you.
Thank you.